Welcome to the Did Hyrum Smith Write the Book of Mormon video. Okay, we have a slide here. This is from the Apostle Joseph Fielding Smith in Doctrines of Salvation, talking about the successor to Joseph Smith. And he says, Brigham Young once said, "Did Joseph Smith ordain a successor to be prophet? Well, who was it? It was Hyrum Smith, but Hyrum Smith fell martyr before the prophet Joseph did. If Hyrum Smith had hearkened to the prophet Joseph and taken his family to Cincinnati instead of going to Carthage jail with Joseph, there would have been a president of the church, and it would not have been Brigham Young because it would have been Hyrum Smith." Okay, so what kind of power did Hyrum Smith have in the church? Well, he had quite a bit. Again, this is the Apostle Joseph Fielding Smith. And he says, Joseph Smith and Hyrum Smith, after 1841, signed documents as co-presidents of the church. That is, co-presidents of the church. Both of them held the keys of the dispensation of the fullness of times jointly. They both held the keys in the fullness of times jointly. And they will through all the ages of eternity. So that's quite a bit of power. Pictured here, we have the death masks of Joseph Smith and Hyrum Smith. This is a comment from C. Gary Bennett in BYU Studies, 2006. He says, "There can be no question that Hyrum Smith is on the short list of the most influential leaders in the church." And we have a comment here on the intelligence of Hyrum Smith. This is from Susie Young Gates. In the book Lydia Knight's History, 1883. And Gates said that Hyrum Smith had a face full of intelligence, and was fascinating to all with whom he ever had intercourse. He was really a worthy brother of the prophet. And we have a comment here from Kathleen Kimball Melanakos. Her book is Secret Combinations, Evidence of Early Mormon Counterfeiting. Came out like a year ago. She gives her opinion here. She says, Hyrum Smith contributed a lot to the Book of Mormon project. He was older, more mature, more sedate, more disciplined, and more educated than Joseph Smith. And we'll talk about that more later. Although they were both well-read. That's her opinion. Okay, a comment here from the Encyclopedia of Mormonism talking about how close Joseph and Hyrum were. He says, although nearly 6 years older than his brother, Hyrum became Joseph's closest advisor and confidant. So Hyrum was Joseph Smith's closest advisor and confidant. Hyrum was associate president of the church, second in authority, and some would say equal in authority to Joseph. Okay, another comment here about the intelligence of Hyrum Smith and what kind of a man he was. This is a letter to the editor in the New York Herald, 1842, so fairly contemporary to Hyrum's life. He says, Hyrum is a prophet, seer, and revelator, and we're going to get to where he got that from. Where he got that information from later. And Hyrum is one of the most pious and devout Christians in the whole world. He is a man of great wisdom, so he's smart and intelligent, and of superior excellence, possessing great energy of character and an originality of thought. So you could say, you know, you need originality of thought and great wisdom to write the Book of Mormon. Okay, another comment here from the Apostle Joseph Fielding Smith, the grandson of Hyrum Smith. Went on to become the prophet. He says, the prophet Joseph Smith conferred upon Hyrum Smith all the keys, authority, and gifts of the priesthood, which he, the prophet, held. So all the keys, authority, and gifts that Joseph Smith held, Hyrum Smith also held. And thus we see that Hyrum Smith became a president of the church with Joseph Smith. So he calls him a president of the church. And Hyrum Smith really helped to organize the early church. This is from the Encyclopedia of Mormonism again. Van Orden. He says, Hyrum Smith is credited in church history with being an astute organizer who gave ecclesiastical leadership to the emerging church. So another comment about the intelligence of Hyrum and his ability to translate. So this is a letter from Hyrum Smith to Elias Smith, 1836. He says, by the help of God, I, Hyrum, can read in the Hebrew Bible and translate fluently. Hyrum says he can read in the Hebrew Bible and translate it fluently into English. So like Joseph Smith, he's also a translator and very intelligent if he can read Hebrew. And to lend credence to that idea, we have the inventory and appraisement of the personal property of Hyrum Smith. He used to spell his name with an I. That's when he was born. We'll talk about that more later. Anyway, Hyrum Smith, 1844. At the time of his death, Hyrum's estate included 2 Hebrew Bibles and a Hebrew dictionary. So he was using those, apparently. So we know that Joseph Smith and Hyrum Smith were not illiterate, and they actually owned a whole bunch of books. You can go through and read these if you want to. You can pause this and read the books that Joseph Smith owned. And since Hyrum Smith was so close to him most of his life, Hyrum would have had access to these books as well. And from the article in the BYU Studies, spring 1974, there was a list by Kenneth W. Godfrey. It's an alphabetical list of books donated by Joseph Smith to the Nauvoo Library and the Literary Institute, January 31st, 1844. So a list of books that Joseph Smith had and donated to the library. You can pause this and go through all these. There's some pretty interesting ones on here, and you can kind of get an idea of what Joseph Smith was interested in and what he read. And, of course, by way of extension, Hyrum Smith. Okay, an interview here with Craig Manskill. This showed up in the BYU Religious Education Review magazine, 2012. And he says, many people thought that Hyrum had the stature and the demeanor of a prophet more than Joseph did. Had a higher stature and a better demeanor to be prophet than Joseph. So was Hyrum a reader and a studier? Well, according to Corbett in his book Hyrum Patriarch, 1963, he was. He says that Hyrum had a keen desire for education, a desire which he later satisfied through observation and consistent home study. Let's go through some facts about Hyrum. He was one of the 8 witnesses to the Book of Mormon plates. Hyrum saw the angel Moroni. At age 30, Hyrum was the oldest of the first 6 members of the church. Hyrum was involved in every aspect of the early church organization, and this is Hyrum pictured above. And in November 1837, Hyrum was appointed second counselor in the church's first presidency. Okay, from the Wikipedia article about Hyrum, it says, Hyrum was assistant president of the church and acted as president of the church in Joseph Smith's absence. Hyrum was designated to be Joseph Smith's successor if he were killed or incapacitated. When Joseph Smith traveled to Washington, D.C., Hyrum served as acting president of the church in Nauvoo, Illinois. He served as acting president when Joseph Smith was absent. There's a book, it's called Joseph and Hyrum, Leading as One. And Hyrum was vice mayor of Nauvoo, Illinois in 1842, so he had some power. Hyrum was a charter member of the Secretive Council of 50 in 1844. The Council of 50 had in mind to run the church, but also to run the government and eventually take over the whole country. and then the whole world, and Hyrum was in at the beginning of that. Okay, from the excellent book, The Mormon Hierarchy, Origins of Power by D. Michael Quinn, he says, a member of the Council of 50 said, in the same council, Joseph ordained his brother Hyrum to be his premier counselor and his successor to the throne. All right, Hyrum Smith was born February 8, 1800, so we'll kind of go backwards here a little bit in time. When he was born, he spelled his name with an I and an A, Hyrum. That's probably because his dad was involved in masonry, and he was probably named after the well-known mason Hyrum Abiff. All right, so let's talk a little bit about Hyrum's education. For 4 years, he actually had a very good education. From the ages of 11 to 15, Hyrum Smith attended Moore's Academy, which was the prep school for Dartmouth College, which is now an Ivy League school, a very good school. And Hyrum was attending the prep school to get into Dartmouth. This was between 1811 and 1815, and Moore's Academy was housed on the Dartmouth campus, and they shared a lot of the same facilities. All right, a statement from Hyrum Smith's mother, Lucy Mack Smith. This is from her preliminary manuscript, History of the Family in 1845. And she says, and as my children had been deprived of school, we made every arrangement to supply that deficiency. Our second son, Hyrum, we sent him to the academy in Hanover, and Moore's Academy is in Hanover. The remainder, who were old enough, attended a common school nearby the home. So Hyrum Smith was the only one to get a better sort of education over at Moore's Academy. And this is how the statement looked when it was published in 1853, The History of Joseph Smith, by his mother, Lucy Mack Smith. It's a little bit different than the preliminary manuscript, and you can read this if you want. Okay, a statement from the book Hyrum Smith, A Life of Integrity, came out in 2003. It was written by Jeffrey O'Driscoll. He says, Hyrum was admitted to Moore's Academy as a charity scholar. Such scholars showed remarkable intellectual potential. Hyrum's designation as a charity scholar in 1814 implies that he performed well academically during his previous years there. So I guess when he started there, he showed remarkable intellectual potential, and he actually got a scholarship. And back to Milanakos's book. It's talking about how Hyrum went to a lot of religious meetings where he could have got a religious education. She says, Hyrum had attended hundreds of Presbyterian meetings, and he taught school at Moore's Academy. So that's interesting. He was not only a student, but at one point he taught school at Moore's Academy. Okay, another statement here about Hyrum becoming a school teacher. This is from Richard K. Behrens in the John Whitmer Historical Association Journal, 2006. An article called Dartmouth Arminianism and its impact on Hyrum Smith. He says, Hyrum became a school teacher in order to support his wife in 1826. Hyrum actually had 2 teaching jobs. Hyrum was elected to the school board of trustees, so kind of as an administrator, which was in Palmyra, New York in 1828, and he was soon interviewing candidates for school teacher. So that's kind of a high-level administrator there who is going to interview other teachers to see if they would be able to teach at the school. And one of Hyrum's second choices was Oliver Cowdery. Okay, another statement about Hyrum teaching school. This one is from S.F. Anderick, 1887 statement in Naked Truths About Mormonism. He says, Hyrum was the only son sufficiently educated to teach school. I attended when he taught in the log schoolhouse east of Uncle's. He also taught in the Stafford district. He and Sophronia were the most respected of the Smith family. Okay, a statement from Melanakos about why Hyrum Smith was sent to the Moors Academy, maybe why he was sent there. She says, why Alvin, being the oldest, did not attend the prestigious school of Moors Academy instead of Hyrum Smith is unknown. Perhaps Hyrum was seen as the better scholar, or maybe Lucy needed Alvin to protect the family when her husband was off on peddling journeys, or intemperate, which is drunk, or otherwise unavailable. The level of education Hyrum would have attained during these middle school years would have exceeded that of the average person. And the Mormon leader / BYU professor Truman Madsen has named Hyrum as the best writer of the early general authorities, so that's interesting. Let's talk about the book View of the Hebrews for a minute. A lot of people think that whoever wrote the Book of Mormon used this book to obtain like 15 or 20 ideas for the Book of Mormon. So that's interesting. Ethan Smith graduated from Dartmouth in 1790. Ethan Smith wrote the popular book View of the Hebrews in 1823. And I did a whole video on View of the Hebrews if you'd like to watch that. Hyrum Smith would have known his son, that is the son of Ethan Smith, who was Lyndon. So maybe Hyrum got some of the ideas for the Book of Mormon by being introduced to his son Lyndon and then introduced to the book View of the Hebrews. Okay, another connection here to Dartmouth. It says Joseph Smith Sr., that's Joseph Smith and Hyrum Smith's dad, was directly related to Professor John Smith, who died in 1809. Professor John Smith taught at Dartmouth College. Professor John Smith was the son of Joseph Smith and Elizabeth Palmer, both cousins of Assail Smith and Mary Duty, who were the paternal grandparents of Joseph Smith Jr. And Professor John Smith developed original lectures over a 17-year period. Hyrum would have been exposed to his ideas. And what were some of these ideas? Well, let's read through them, see if any of them ring a bell. If you were raised Mormon, these should be familiar to you. Professor John Smith's lectures were about the following. Greek philosophy provided the concept of the pre-existence. The atonement covenant was made in the pre-existence. The plan of salvation was agreed to in the pre-existence, all very familiar. Father, Son, and sons of men were together in the pre-existence. Son's church would exist in all ages after the fall. Oaths, that's oaths, and covenants serve as deity's legal structure. The Melchizedek priesthood is co-eternal with God. Interesting, the Melchizedek priesthood is co-eternal with God. Where did that idea come from for the Melchizedek priesthood? The priesthood is the source of the Son's authority. The Aaronic priesthood is promised to Aaron's descendants. So there it is, both the lower priesthood and the higher priesthood listed out by John Smith, the Aaronic priesthood and the Melchizedek priesthood. Free agency and the right to choose is integral to the plan. Degrees of glory is the structure of the eternities. Consecration to Christ is required for the highest exaltation. Spirit is a simpler form of matter. The prosperity cycle is the natural direction of history. And there's millions of peopled worlds. Most of these should be familiar to any Mormon. And we go back to Barron's article. He says, Hyrum's education at Moore's school provided a tutor for unschooled Joseph. So in other words, Hyrum's getting a better education than Joseph. So Hyrum actually became the tutor of Joseph Smith. Hyrum's exposure to Dartmouth's theology, cosmology, etc. provided discussion material for tutoring Joseph during his long recovery from leg surgery in 1813 that kept Joseph at home on crutches. So it very well could be that Hyrum was getting this awesome education, including religion, theology, cosmology, etc., and then was a tutor to Joseph Smith when he had his leg surgery. And Hyrum was also respected as a master mason in the Mount Moriah Lodge in Palmyra, New York. And Hyrum directed the building of all the early Mormon temples. And we know that a lot of masonry found its way into the Mormon temple ceremonies. So you wonder if Hyrum had anything to do with coming up with those ceremonies. So like Joseph Smith, Hyrum also obtained his own seer stone, and he began seeing people's lost and stolen goods for a fee or in exchange for living expenses. So in that respect, he was very similar to Joseph Smith, the prophet, seer, and revelator. Hyrum had his own seer stone, and he began looking for buried treasure. Okay, a statement by Eber D. Howe in Mormonism Unveiled, a very early book in 1834 about the Mormons. It says, about the summer and fall of 1822, a brown seer stone is found by Willard Chase while digging a well on the Chase property. Willard Chase said that Hyrum borrowed the stone in 1825 and never returned it. So notice, Hyrum is the one who borrowed the stone in 1825, not Joseph Smith. Okay, a statement by Henry Sayers, statement before the Justice of the Peace, A.P. Barber. It says that Hyrum was a treasure digger or a treasure seeker. It says, when a young man, I spent much of the summers along the Susquehanna River. I became acquainted with Joseph Smith, Hyrum Smith, and Bill Smith, whom I often saw hunting and digging for buried money, treasure, or lost and hidden things. So, again, Hyrum Smith is very similar to Joseph Smith in his treasure digging. Okay, a revelation received in Harmony, Pennsylvania. It's for Hyrum Smith. You can read this in D&C 11. The precursor to that was in the Book of Commandments, chapter 9. It says, cleave unto me with all your heart, and he's talking to Hyrum, that you may assist in bringing to light those things of which have been spoken, yea, the translation of my work. So Hyrum was to be involved per the Lord in the translation of the Book of Mormon. Be patient until you shall accomplish it. All right, so the Book of Mormon was translated between April 7 and June of 1829. There was a revelation received on May 1829 for Hyrum Smith during that time frame in the Book of Commandments, chapter 9, that talks about Hyrum being the one who is doing the translating of the Book of Mormon. Weird. Why would Hyrum be the one mentioned in this scripture as being the one translating the Book of Mormon? So let's read it. It says, study my word, which shall come forth among the children of men, which is the Book of Mormon, or that which you, Hyrum, are translating. Weird. Was that just a slip? Was that a mistake? Study my word, the Book of Mormon, or that which you, Hyrum, are translating, because the revelation was given to Hyrum Smith. Well, in the D&C later on, this was changed, and it said, study my word, which shall come forth among the children of men, the Book of Mormon, or that which is now translating. It doesn't mention you, which was Hyrum. The revelation was given to Hyrum. It says, the Book of Mormon, which is now translating. So that's an interesting change and maybe a slip, or maybe Hyrum really was the one translating it. And it was also Hyrum who negotiated with E.B. Grandin for 5,000 copies of the Book of Mormon to be printed for $3,000. So he was involved in all of this that was going on. It is also interesting to note that the printer's copy of the Book of Mormon that David Whitmer possessed bears the handwriting of 3 individuals. So the printer's copy has the handwriting of 3 individuals, including Hyrum Smith. And it was Hyrum who brought the Book of Mormon transcript to the printer. It was also Hyrum's idea to sell the copyright to the Book of Mormon in Canada. That is the Canadian copyright. On September 22nd, 1827, it was Hyrum who provided a box for the safekeeping of the plates. Okay, so a few stories here for the true believing Mormons. This may make you think more highly of Hyrum. September 15, 1831, Hyrum administers to William E. McClellan, who is instantly healed. So that's interesting. Maybe Hyrum had some power of the priesthood. And another story of healing by Hyrum. On October 1st, 1831, Hyrum administers to the ill daughter of a local minister who is immediately healed. And Hyrum was also a very good missionary. In October and November of 1831, Hyrum travels west with Orson Hyde, and they converted and baptized many. So maybe Hyrum had the gift of healing. He also supposedly had the gift of speaking in tongues. January 22nd, 1833, Hyrum speaks in tongues at the commencement of the School of the Prophets. It's interesting. I've never heard a Mormon speak in tongues, but I guess they used to. In 1834, Hyrum helped to recruit members for Zion's camp and served as Joseph Smith's chief aide in that military march. On December 6, 1834, Hyrum was ordained to the office of presidency of the high priesthood by Joseph Smith. So that was probably a fairly high calling, presidency of the high priesthood. He was also supposed to have prophesied correctly. In the winter of 1835, Hyrum prophesies regarding the future of the church in the Rocky Mountains. And of course, it was a long time before they went to the Rocky Mountains. And Hyrum was also supposed to have seen angels in the Kirtland Temple, January 28, 1836. Also in 1841 and 1842, Hyrum writes two of the first presidency's messages to the church. So that's probably giving more evidence and credence to the fact that he was a very good writer. Another fact about Hyrum, in 1842, it was Hyrum who clarified that hot drinks in the Word of Wisdom referred to tea and coffee. Okay, D&C 124, that's Doctrine and Covenants. It says, my servant Hyrum may take the office of priesthood and patriarch. Kind of a strange office. The office of priesthood and patriarch, which was appointed unto him by his father, that's Joseph Smith Sr., by blessing and also by right. That's blood right. The office of patriarch was supposed to be handed down from father to son. Okay, so the presiding patriarch was a very high office in the church at the time in 1841. This is from Dr. D. Michael Quinn, a statement. He says, in administrative matters, the presiding patriarch Hyrum presided over the Quorum of the 12. That's right, the presiding patriarch was a higher office than anybody in the Quorum of the 12, including the president of the Quorum of the 12. So he was presiding over that quorum after their return from the British mission in 1841. Okay, another statement by Quinn. He says, Hyrum Smith's relationship to the 12 was that of a superior. His office was higher than the 12 or the president of the 12. And Hyrum's relationship to the first presidency was that of an equal. Rank-and-file Mormons understood that Hyrum Smith, as patriarch, presided over the church with his brother Joseph. Okay, so what is the highest office in the church? Joseph Smith told us at a May 27, 1843 meeting, the prophet Joseph Smith said, the patriarchal office, that's the office that Hyrum Smith held, is the highest office in the church. The patriarchal office is the highest office in the church, and Father Joseph Smith Sr. conferred this office on Hyrum Smith on his deathbed. So in that statement, Hyrum had the highest office in the church. Another interesting statement here by Quinn says, Joseph publicly designated his brother Hyrum as a successor in July of 1843 4 days later, Joseph Smith announced that Hyrum held the office of prophet to the church by birthright. So he was also a prophet. Okay, the Times and Seasons newspaper alerted the church membership in October 1843 that Joseph and Hyrum Smith acted jointly, that is, they acted jointly as presidents of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. So they shared the office, kind of like co-presidents of the church, and Joseph said that Hyrum was to be the successor if anything happened to Joseph. And Quinn also said, during Joseph Smith's lifetime, the Quorum of the 12 Apostles never had authority to ordain even a stake patriarch, and certainly not the presiding patriarch Hyrum. So Hyrum was above the 12. Okay, so Hyrum had the sealing powers as well. Doctrine and Covenants 124, that whoever he, Hyrum, blesses shall be blessed. Kind of goes back to those healings of blessings, right, where he healed the sick. And whoever he curses shall be cursed. That whatsoever he shall bind on earth shall be bound in heaven, and whatsoever he shall loose on earth shall be loosed in heaven. So that's a lot of power for Hyrum. And then in D&C 124, a very direct statement. It says, and from this time forth I appoint unto him Hyrum, that he may be a prophet and a seer and a revelator unto my church, as well as my servant Joseph. So it's interesting that he and Joseph had the same powers. They served as co-prophets, co-prophet, seer, and revelator, according to the revelations of the church and according to Joseph Smith. So why was that? Why did he have so much power? It could be just that he was the brother of Joseph. It could be that he was instrumental in bringing the Book of Mormon forth and translating it and in writing it and helping to write it, maybe with others or maybe by himself. And again, in the Times and Seasons, 1841, by revelation, Hyrum has been appointed a prophet and a revelator. And D&C 124 says that Hyrum will be crowned with the same blessing as Joseph. So let's read this one quickly. That he may act in concert also with my servant Joseph. That's he, Hyrum, may act in concert with Joseph, who shall show unto him the keys whereby he may ask and receive, and be crowned with the same blessing as Joseph Smith in glory and honor and priesthood and the gifts of the priesthood. And it continues, that my servant Hyrum may bear record of the things which I shall show unto him, that his name may be had in honorable remembrance from generation to generation forever and ever. So that's quite the remembrance from generation to generation and forever. All right, we have a picture here of the Masonic Lodge in Nauvoo, Illinois, probably built by the church here. It said that Hyrum presided as the worshipful master of this lodge and was side by side with Joseph Smith in the church leadership throughout their lives. So this was a joint project. Co-presidents, co-leaders, they ran the church together throughout their life, and the members of the church understood this, and we have to ask, why was it? Was it just because he was the brother? By October 1st, 1827, Joseph and Hyrum had formed the Gold Bible Company. On June 15, 1844, less than 2 weeks before his death, Hyrum Smith signed an announcement as Hyrum Smith, president of the church. So that's kind of interesting. He's signing a document as president of the church. In 2 weeks, he would be dead with his brother Joseph. On June 27, 1844, Hyrum Smith was shot and killed in Carthage jail with his brother. On April 6, 1845, the church sustains Hyrum as a martyr to the truth. A nice scripture here, Doctrine and Covenants 135, verse 3. He, Joseph Smith, lived great, and he died great in the eyes of God and his people. And like most of the Lord's anointed in ancient times, Joseph Smith has sealed his mission and his works with his own blood, and so has his brother Hyrum. He sealed his mission and his works with his own blood. That's Hyrum as well as Joseph. In life, they were not divided, and in death, they were not separated. They ran the church together as co-equals. All right, a little bit about the legacy of Hyrum. Hyrum's son, Joseph F. Smith, became the 6th president of the church, and his grandson, Joseph Fielding Smith, became the 10th president, so that's quite a legacy. So if Hyrum would have lived instead of being killed with Joseph in Carthage, he probably would have been the new president. I would say most definitely. As it was, Joseph and Hyrum died together, so there was a succession crisis. Sidney Rigdon, Joseph Smith III, William Smith, James Strang, William Marks, David Whitmer, Lyman White, Brigham Young, and Alpheus Cutler all had claim to be prophet and president of the Mormon Church. So Brigham Young kind of vaulted the president of the Quorum of the 12 as having a lot more power than he used to really have. And he was the winner, of course, to the secession crisis. Again, Apostle Joseph Fielding Smith said, "The prophet Joseph earnestly desired that his brother Hyrum should live to succeed him in the presidency of the church. In the year 1841, by command of the Lord, he ordained him, Hyrum, to this exalted position of president of the church in case something happened to Joseph." So he probably would have been the president. Okay, again from the Apostle Joseph Fielding Smith. I'll go through this one quickly. Shortly before the martyrdom, the prophet tried with all his power to persuade Hyrum not to accompany him to Carthage, knowing full well the fate that awaited them there. So kind of a prophecy. Had Hyrum stayed behind and thereby remained in mortality, he would, by virtue of his position and the ordination received in 1841, he would have become the president of the church. His brother thought that this should be. Okay, a quick statement by the prophet Heber J. Grant. No mortal man who ever lived in this church desired more to do good than did Hyrum Smith. All right, so did Hyrum Smith write the Book of Mormon? Well, from this video, we learned that he was a very intelligent man. He had more schooling than any of the other Smith children. He actually went to a very good prep school there at Dartmouth campus. So maybe he there learned enough to write the Book of Mormon. We know that he was a very good writer, according to other people who have studied his writings. So maybe he was the one to write the Book of Mormon. I've tried to present the case here, and I will present it for other people as well.